Hi, good evening, and welcome to our March Mental Health Mondays titled Narcissism and Gaslighting in Relationships. I am the co-chair of the Physical and Mental Health Committee for the Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I am pleased to welcome all of you on our virtual audience, as well as to introduce our moderators and our panelists. We will have a Q&A box available for questions and would love to keep this session interactive. As we could see from our record number of registrants, this is a topic that is clearly plaguing our constituents. Dealing with narcissism, as we talked about in our pre-conversation, is really another form of relationship abuse. And we really hope to unpack this topic in a meaningful way from our psychologists, as well as our other panelists who has been a direct victim of narcissism in her own relationship. So our moderators tonight include our PMH, Physical and Mental Health Chair, Rashawn Mitchell Jefferson, as well as our PMH Subcommittee Lead, Dr. Nadia Barnett. Next, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, I'll start with Dr. Matt Smith, who is a clinical licensed psychologist and the owner and CEO of Atlanta Consulting and Psychological Services. He obtained his bachelor's and master's degree from the Jackson State University in Liberal Arts and Counseling, and his doctorate degree in clinical psychology from the Forrest Institute of Professional Psychology in Springfield, Missouri. He has provided individual and couples and family therapy to adults and adolescents for over 20 years. Some of his areas of interest include mental health awareness, hence this webinar, advocacy and public safety, community awareness, multicultural approaches to therapy, as well as extinguishing stigmas of mental health in the African American culture. In addition, Dr. Smith also provides consultations for individuals who are struggling in the areas of career development, college and graduate student growth and development. He conducts psychological evaluations for ADHD, as well as other mood and anxiety disorders. So welcome to Dr. Smith, who will just be going by Matt tonight. Next, we have Nichelle, who is the co-founder and executive director of Happy Mama, Happy Minnie, Inc., which is a 501c3 nonprofit mental health awareness organization that focuses on giving back through life-changing experiences within the community and schools. She co-founded the organization with her daughter, Hannah Marie, and together they've grown and established an amazing board, executive team, and volunteers. Her professional background includes the Target Corporation as an executive team leader. And in recent years, she consulted for the mayor of Atlanta in the last term, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and also has professional experience in consulting, as well as with the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, the Rolling Peach ATL, and several other companies. Ultimately, Nichelle's extensive professional experience, business background, and proven leadership allows her the flexibility and confidence to provide excellent services for family growth and teams. So welcome to both of our panelists, and I'll turn it over to our moderators.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cherie Hill, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. And we're just going to jump right on in with talking about first gaslighting. So I'm going to open the floor for our panelists to really give us your feedback or based on your experience or your training on what gaslighting is and what it isn't, because this is a term that's really been thrown around a lot in layman's terms, social media. And I think before we can just kind of get through the conversation, we really need to make sure we solidify what we're talking about. So we're going to start with gaslighting. What is it and what is it not?
Okay, I could start with gaslighting. Gaslighting is like a form of psychological abuse in which a person or group causes someone to question their own sanity, memories, perceptions of reality, And people who experience gaslighting may feel confused, anxious, or as though they cannot trust themselves. So really it's a high aspect of manipulation and control, and it's a form of abuse. And oftentimes it's verbal. And it can also make you feel at times that you have memory issues, or that the person can make you feel like that you're going crazy, or just aspects of manipulation.
Thank
Yes,
you
I
so
would have
much.
to agree with Dr. Matt. Sorry, I not the expert, but definitely everything that he's just said about gaslighting, I have experienced firsthand in a previous marriage. And we talked a little bit before this, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But in addition to a marriage, I realized once learning about gaslighting and learning about narcissism, because I really did not know that before I experienced it, I realized it was in other aspects of my life as well that I was blinded to and had no idea.
Thank you so much, Nichelle and Matt. Yes, I would agree. I've experienced it as well. I think to some degree we all have, and maybe we don't even realize it, right?
Yeah.
And before we jump right into questions, I do want to go ahead and clarify narcissism. And Matt, can you clarify narcissism for us in terms of what is it? And then we do have a question in the chat that combines both of these.
Okay, great. Well, narcissism is basically a person or individual who deals with people and doesn't have a conscience at times. It's not empathetic. They have an aspect of privilege, entitlement, feeling a grandiose persona and perception. They need to be valued at all times. And narcissistic personality is a personality disorder. So a lot of times personality disorders cannot be fixed. Usually a personality disorder is fixed within a person's dynamic. So I'm going to read a little bit from the DSM-5, the criteria of narcissism personality disorder. And 5 out of 9 criteria, you are placed with the disorder. So one of the criteria is a grandiose sense of self-importance, exaggerates achievements and talents, and expects to be recognized as superior. The second aspect is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, ideal love. And oftentimes, the Greek mythology narcissist, the person was looking themselves in the lake, saw their reflection, and grew old. Mm-hmm. So this person, you can see a lot of people on social media constantly taking these selfies or constantly always looking at themselves and things of that nature. That is one aspect of narcissism, but you need 5 out of 9. Believe that he or she is special, another criteria, or unique, and can only be understood by other people who are associated with them that has high status people. So they only want to hang around people who are high status or people who are important, or they want to be around celebrities. And so they're oftentimes are very starstruck. Excessive admiration. They need the admiration. They need you to pour into them and give them their flowers all the time. And it's a daily thing, which it can be very stressful. Has a sense of entitlement. That's number 5. There is 4 more. And it states that it's interpersonally exploitive. The next one is lacks empathy, is often envious of others and believes that others are envious of them, and shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Those are 9 criteria of narcissism. And oftentimes these correlate with gaslighting behaviors. So that's the reason why narcissism and gaslighting is such a great, rich topic. And I'm glad that you guys brokered this topic, because they often go hand in hand, kind of like, a well-made sandwich.
So, Nichelle, being that you have the firsthand experience, so now that Matt has given us by definition, what does it look like to you, being that you didn't know what it was when you were going through it?
Yes, for me, I feel like most people may say, oh my God, they're so similar. But to me, they're so different, because you can deal with a narcissist that you don't see every day, you know, in terms of like at work or with a family member. Living with someone and experiencing it is a lot different, especially if in turn you're also being gaslighted. So you then realize that it truly is a difference. It's like, oh my God, I'm crazy and I'm not giving you enough. Like, what in the world? So you really do kind of go crazy.
I think Nichelle points out, or your comment response actually lends itself to our first question that was posted in the chat box in reference to how to maintain boundaries with a narcissist who is in the position of being your ex-husband that you share young children with.
Oh, that's a great question. And first I have to take my hat off to Nichelle for sharing and disclosing her experience. Oftentimes when you're dealing with a person who is a narcissistic gaslighter, there's a lot of trauma that's involved. And so, you know, when you're dealing with trauma, you have to have a lot of support. So one of the ways that you can garner support is just doing what she's talking about. It. Talk to people that you trust and that people who will support you and help you to kind of move forward with your life. Your support systems are very important, because when you're feeling like you're crazy, you need to connect to other people who let you know that no, you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with your memory, that you're doing things in a way that makes sense. Because the person who is gaslighting, what they're doing is they're trying to attack what? They're trying to attack your self-esteem. They're trying to get you under their control so they can further control you, and they can manipulate you, and they can keep you under wraps. They would, if you're a beautiful person, but they'll say, oh, well, you know what, that doesn't look good on you, or that hairstyle is not, you know. So they're constantly critiquing and criticizing to lower your self-esteem, because they're really trying to heighten their self-esteem. They're the ones who have the low self-esteem. They're the ones who have issues, and they might have mother complex, father complex, or oftentimes gaslighting is learned behavior. So they learned it in their family structure. And so what they're doing is they're projecting their self-esteem, their lack of value onto you, because what? Misery likes miserable company. Misery don't like company. Misery likes miserable company. So they want you miserable, just as miserable as they are. And so I want to just applaud you, Nichelle, for just disclosing about your history and about things that you're dealing with and have dealt with to people that you might not even know that's on this Zoom call.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I do believe that because I did not have any knowledge or really any personal experience with this beforehand, God has brought me through this for a reason, because I am not ashamed, and I will live the rest of my life trying to help others, especially those that have small children and that are involved in situations that they just really never imagined being a part of. I think first thing is recognizing that you are in a relationship that is such. I think it was a long time before I realized it, long enough for me rather. But it was, we had a situation that took place. Child Protective Services had to get involved in my marriage to protect my daughter and I. And it was the assigned therapist through Child Protective Services that gave me a list. And on this list, you had to check each thing that you had been experiencing. And she gave me the list like it was a blanket list. I didn't know, exactly what I was checking it for, but she was like, hey, if you experience any of these things, I want you to check these things off this list. Literally every single thing on the list of 20 plus things I had experienced, except I didn't have any pets. So I think it was a question relating to a pet. And that was the only thing that I did not check. And I was like, what's this list about? And when she explained it to me, it was legit revealing to me, you're in an abusive relationship and have been for X amount of time. And so finding out this information is just like, oh my gosh, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Like, I have knowledge. I can't go talk to someone because I don't know anyone that's ever been through this either. And what am I supposed to tell people? Like, and again, being gaslighted and dealing with a narcissist at the same time, I just really was in a place of confusion, and in a wreck with a brand new baby. So I think once I realized exactly what it was, I leaned to that lady's guidance with a little bit of resilience. I was like, oh no, it can't be this serious. And it really was, and found out in the worst ways possible. And so once that happened, I leaned to her guidance and realized, okay, I need to get help, or this would be the end of me and my child. And limiting communication was something that is hard to do, especially when you are married or sharing a child with someone, or, you know, sharing whatever it may be, given it's not a relationship, like a spousal relationship. It can be very hard. And, but you have to honestly just believe in yourself and know that it's important for you to do the right thing, especially, I think you mentioned if children were involved. I think things may look different because every situation is different. So sometimes when children aren't involved, it may look a little different. You may have different types of boundaries, or you may not know what boundaries look like when you do have children. So getting involved with a therapist, at the time, I had to see a psychiatrist for years. And that was the worst reality for me. Like, I have to see a psychiatrist. Like, oh my God, I was in denial and was on medication, and that I at first was refusing to take, and really had to be real with myself and have a come to Jesus meeting, and was like, if you want to get better for yourself, for your child, for others around you, you need to do with these people that you're putting trust in, that again, Matt, that you studied and you know how to help people in those type of situations. And I just really had to let my guard down and trust. And that's what I did. I do feel sad for some people that have to share in my situation, because my ex-husband attempted to kill both my daughter and I have a permanent restraining order against him. So there's a no contact rule. So where I don't have to share my child with a narcissist parent or a person that gaslight with me and would gaslight a child, and whatever the case may be. But I do have to deal with it on the other hand of my child asking 1,000,001 questions that honestly, she's just not ready to hear certain things. So I still deal with that in the inside, and still have to go to therapy, and still have to have, you know, to your point, talking to people. And now that I've started this nonprofit with my child, I'm involved with helping other people. That has become so healing. In healing, because people need a village that are going through things of that nature, that are ashamed, that feel like, oh no, not me. That could never happen to me. And I was very heavily involved in the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, dealing with people that dealt with stuff like this, supporting them, and didn't see the signs myself. So it can happen to anyone. And I just think really it's just important to recognize and just have people around you that you trust.
Thank you so much, Nichelle and Matt. Just to clarify, so going back to the question, if you're dealing with a person such as an ex-husband or someone who you're sharing parental responsibilities with, how do you maintain the boundaries? I heard get a support system in place, that's, you know, people that you can trust. I heard limit communication, seek therapy. Would there be any other recommendations? And
keep your journal.
Keep a journal.
Yes, a
journal, because a lot of times when a person is dealing with your mental dynamics, and also with your memory, keep a journal. Keep a journal, a daily journal, so you know, okay, hold on, I wrote this down, so I know I said this and I did this, right? Oftentimes people will also have a recording, and some of these things can be used in court, and you have to make sure that the recording can be used in your particular state. But sometimes you have to record conversations and arguments and things of that nature, because down the road, a person would say, hey, I didn't say that, or you didn't say that, or, you know, because that's what the controlling person is doing. They're trying to make you,
right.
They might try to make you feel insecure. They're trying to take away something that you cherish, which is your mental acumen. Right.
And Matt, something that I would add to that in terms of the journal, a journal may look different, especially if there's no privacy in your home and you're living with a person. Something that I did, I used my notes in my phone, and no one knew that that's what I was using. And I used that as journal entries, because if it was something written down, or my activity would be like, oh, she always goes to this particular place or whatever, it would be ruined because things had been ruined. So once I realized, when I was physically writing things down, okay, this isn't going to work, because someone's either reading them and again using that against you, to gaslight you or say, hey, I'm gonna use this, and they're gonna just take your baby away from you, just whatever they can to disrupt what you have going on. So definitely, if you're not in a situation where you have privacy, totally use an app on your phone that, maybe someone cannot get into. Also, I would say too, educate yourself, do your own research. And that way, within your heart that it's resonating with you. It's not what someone else told you. It's something that you can resonate with. So, education is a key. No one can take that away from us. So the more you educate yourself, the better you start to feel, where you're then able to recognize what's happening to you. And then you prioritize your self-care, because especially when there's children involved, or you're a high position at a job, or you're helping other people raise children, or you're caring for people in a hospital, all that stuff matters. And everyone's human at the end of the day. So I just think limiting the contact, like I mentioned before, focusing on your self-care is really, really important, and rebuilding your self-esteem, because a narcissist and gaslighting, it's meant to tear you down, break you apart. So educating yourself and building yourself back up.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions that came in reference going back to narcissism. And Matt, if you can clarify, is there a difference? Two questions, and I'll start with the first one. Is there a difference between narcissism, this general term, and narcissistic personality disorder?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can have narcissistic and not be a narcissist. But the narcissistic personality disorder has 5 criteria out of 9. And it could be anything from empathy to feeling like entitlement, all those things I just read out to you guys. And then having a moment of grandeur, that could just be, a person's feeling really good about themselves, and they might brag about themselves, but they understand that, hey, I had a moment,
right?
And they caught it, but they care about others, and don't feel entitled and things of that nature. So sometimes people will confuse you having a grandiose moment with you being a narcissist, where it happens to us all. We all get to a point where we have to pat ourselves on the back. We have to do things to raise our self-esteem. It doesn't mean that we're a narcissist. It just means that, hey, I'm proud of myself. What they say, I did that.
Yes.
So sometimes you need that, if you can't look yourself in the mirror and give yourself affirmations, then that's an issue. But if you're breaking people down and tearing people down in order to build yourself up, red flag.
Yes.
If you're always need people to give you affirmations, if you're fishing for affirmations, if you are, like I said before, entitled, and then you're envious, whereas no, they didn't deserve that, I deserve that. We call that being a hater. So, so there's a lot of aspects to it. If you got all those things, you put it together, then you fit the criteria for a narcissistic personality disorder, and you fit it to a T. So there is a difference.
And sometimes I think you too have to be careful, because these people are around you, and they may not be a hater towards you, but in every scenario at work or different activities or events that they're involved in, they're giving off that energy. Those are also signs that kind of go unnoticed, because it's not directly happening to you in that moment.
Yes. And, you both so thank you for the clarity, Matt. And thank you, Nichelle, for bringing up a good point that, what we're talking about has to do with relationships and interactions. So that can be with a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a coworker, a friend. These are interactions with people. The basis and the foundation for this particular group of that we're talking about has to do with what can they get from a person to fulfill their own individual personal needs, right? So in saying that, and we've talked about or mentioned how social media can exacerbate some of these symptoms. As a parent, is there anything that we can do to help not nurture narcissism or nurture the development of narcissistic personality disorder as a parent, right? Because and let me kind of put this in context. So, here we are in 2023, where we want our children to be involved in everything, but also be a superstar in everything, right? We want to build their confidence, but are we going too far with that? And through that nurturing and the environment that as parents we somewhat control with our children, are we cultivating these symptomology in our children to then be adults that then have these traits?
We can, because OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and narcissism go hand in hand. So when you're portraying perfection towards your kids, you're also planting seeds of narcissism within their dynamics. So you have to be very careful. Allow your kids to make mistakes. Let them know that no one's perfect. If they give 100%, that is good enough. Don't gaslight your kids. So I have a 3-year-old daughter, Olivia. And so she's crying. I'm not going to say, oh, you stop all that crying. You're being sensitive. So don't label your kids. So when she's crying, I'm like, okay, now why are you crying? Mm-hmm. Talk to me. Tell me why are you crying? What's going on? And so that's how I talk to her. And then I give her the dialogue that she can tell me what's going on, or she'll stop and she'll realize, I ain't crying over anything. Okay, well, come on. So I think that don't label your kids. Don't call your kids names and things of that nature because you're upset. Don't push the perfection. Like, okay, I want you to be perfect at everything you do. Oh, you didn't get 100? Oh, okay. Well, you know what? You should have got 100. You only got 95. What happened? Rather than being proud that they got 95. If they got an 80 and that this is something they struggle on, guess what? Lollipop time.
Right.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Because they did their best. And so that's what you want from your kids. But oftentimes as parents, the parent-child dynamic, we can elicit narcissistic behaviors and spring upon those things within our children if we're not careful.
Yes, I would have to agree. And as someone, again, with my experience, having a child by someone that exclude more than just narcissism and gaslighting, that's just the two we're talking about today, it made me really nervous. I was so nervous that actually one of my college roommates is a neuro doctor. And I reached out to her when I was going through the things that I was going through. And I'm like, what can I do? Is my child going to be crazy? Like, I was really nervous. It was a true concern of mine. And, she reassured me that, no, you're not crazy. You're doing the right thing by wondering. But I will say this, my ex-husband to me was smart, and maybe it was mismanaged as a child. And then he got bored and maybe started, venturing off and doing things that he didn't have any business doing. Know your children. And I spent a lot of time with getting to know my child and knowing what her needs are, knowing how she wants to be loved, how she needs to be loved, and how she needs to be supported. And from that, I know, okay, she's super smart. I'm going to have to put her in things that's going to capture her attention and put her in learning environments and encourage her along the way. And that's what I did, and I think to Matt's point, talking to your child. Like my child, every day before we go to bed, it's name 3 things that was, and this is her initiating with me. Name 3 things, Mom, that was the best part of your day. And then I have to name 3 things, and then vice versa. Every morning we say, she initiates this before she gets out the car. She says prayers for her classmates and her teachers and her family. And, you know, whenever and again, she helps me run this mental health nonprofit. So it's inside of her to give back and to be appreciative and to know it's okay. She's in a lot of activities and she's like, Mom, I had fun. And that's what we talk about, the fun in it. You're 7 years old. Perfection doesn't exist. And it's really, really important for me to make sure that she knows that, including in her other friends. And also, if we go to a birthday party, guess what, Hannah Marie? Today is Mia's day. All about Mia. And she knows she don't ask for anything. She caters to her friends. So prepping them and teaching them and leading by example, I think, are ways that you can help your children out in these type of situations, and them not to feel greed or not to feel, you know, like, oh, this person got this, I want this. Well, it's not about you today. It's about them. So what are we going to do for this person to put a smile on this person's face because of X, Y, and Z? So just really modeling that behavior and course correcting it if it ever gets off course. But I would say I've been doing that from like the jump with my relationship with my daughter. And I mean, I would be so scared to have another child because she is such an amazing little girl. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I'll be greedy if I wanted another child, I feel like.
Thank you so much. You know, you both bring up really great points, and to emphasize letting go of perfectionism from your child, or encouraging perfectionism from your child. And also, you know, Nichelle mentioned get to know your child. Matt talked about talking with your child. You have to, and I also think you need to understand that it's okay for your child to be different than you, and it's okay for your child to have skills that you don't have. And that if you are in a space where you don't know how to cultivate those skills in your child, that's a time where you seek out help and support with that.
Right.
Thank you so much. Let me move
Nadia,
on.
may I add
Yes.
one more thing? I'm sorry. I also want to say too, it's kind of like you teach people how to treat you. So when you're responsible for being, you are teaching people how to treat that person, and that person is watching. So you allow your child to have boundaries. You're that voice for that child. You're that advocate for that child. So they are growing up in comfort, where they're able to talk to you about certain things because they know that you are a protector. And one thing I think old school, they want kids to hug them and kiss them all the time. Well, my daughter used to hang with me. People like, your daughter didn't give me a hug. Okay, great. You know, like setting that tone. She doesn't have to hug you if she doesn't want to. Heck, she don't have to hug me if she doesn't feel like it today. You know, like just setting those boundaries so that children know what's okay and what's not okay. Sorry. Just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you so much. You know, as we're talking about narcissism, and we've talked about the development and how parenting can impact or influence. A question came up with regards to the disorder or the personality disorder. Can this be genetic, Matt? Or is this, this is that nature versus nurture question.
Personality disorders are usually environmental. They're not genetic. Now, we have other disorders that have more of a genetic strain, like depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. But usually personality disorders do not. And so narcissism is learned behavior. So if you come up in an environment, whether it could be an environment that is conducive to the people gaslighting in the relationship, or you come up in an environment where it's dysfunctional and you're trying to be perfect because you're trying to get away from the dysfunction, that can create the narcissistic mindset. I'm better than this. I'm better than everybody in the household. I'm better than and then you go back to family reunions and now you're acting snobby and things of that nature. I'm from the inner city of Detroit, so I can't go back to my neighborhood acting snobby. And no, because it's just I'm from a blue collar area and family. And so that was grounding for me. And I appreciate coming up in a household that was very down to earth people. So that made me feel, a little bit better about dealing with people who are from maybe a lower status than I am economically to somebody who is a higher status from me, because I just look at you as a person. So I try to look at a person's character, not what you have, not what you got, or not what you can give me, but how you treat me and how I treat you. So that's a foundation for, just having balance in, with behavior and having balance so far as within your own personality. So once again, narcissism is usually learned behavior.
Thank you so much for clarifying that for us. We're going to jump into the next question in reference to, I'm trying to figure out, there's so many questions here. So you have a person in your life who, or someone that's on here listening, whether live on Facebook or YouTube or on here on the Zoom, they're probably thinking of some person, somebody, or maybe a few people in their lives that fit the criteria of what we're talking about. Is there a way to have an honest and respectful conversation with a person who fits some of the criteria that we're talking about, who has displayed gaslighting behavior and some of the other narcissistic traits? Would you suggest trying to have honest conversation with that person?
If you're doing it for yourself, if you're doing it to change the individual, then no. If you're doing it for you, please do. I mean, you can talk to a wall, and and the wall is not going to change. So what's the definition of insanity? You're trying to change a narcissist. Good luck with that, because narcissism in its whole premise is a person who doesn't have empathy, doesn't have a conscience. They only care about themselves. So within just the foundation of that, you're not going to change a narcissist much, but the narcissist can be the charmer. So what they'll do is we call this hoovering, and it's like named after a vacuum cleaner, right? Whereas that they will suck you in by being charming and things of that nature, and then guess what? It comes right back to where they were, right back to the verbal abuse, and then right back to the manipulation, and right back to, making you feel like you're crazy and things of that nature. And so a lot of times in domestic abuse situations, that's what happens. That's what domestic abuse people do. They will charm you. They will come the flowers, the presents, telling you what you want to hear. And then, boom, hit you again with another verbal assault. Or hit you again with a physical assault, and then come back again, this time not flowers, this time jewelry, because they know your weakness and they can connect to those things that you want. So they love the gold digger person. Oh, that person is just prey to the narcissist.
Yes, be careful.
Oh my God, yes. Because I can control you now. Because I know that you all for, glitz, glamour, material stuff. So I will take advantage of your shallowness.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want to add that, what we're talking about is behavior, the manipulation that these individuals use has worked. So because they work, they continue to use them. They've worked with different people in different settings. And so the idea of trying to talk someone out of doing something that has worked well for them may not be to your benefit.
That's very true. A lot of times a person looks for people that they can manipulate, or they will charm a person and oftentimes get a person into a financial situation, or have a child with a person, and then boom, they're rid of ugly head, because they know that people usually, when you connect your money together, then now I need you. And and now we have a child together, so now I need you. because I need it's more for my child. So I'm putting my child in front of my own feelings and things of that nature. So we use those things that that a person really, really embraces, that's enriching to them, and we manipulate those things.
Matt, that is spot on. I think for me in my relationship, I value family like all the way up here. So me having a child in that person's mind was like, she will never leave. I mean, that even came out of his mouth to people, like, she values family way too much. And, you know, it really took my parents to talk to me and like, listen, this is not healthy what we're witnessing. I'm not sure what's going on, but it just doesn't feel healthy, and it's okay. And I felt like because I value family so much, having that support allowed me to break that wall that I did keep up because of how much I love family. And so to your point, whatever your weakness is per se, that person knows, they studies it, and they play on those emotions.
Absolutely. And you provided a great segue to our next question in terms of Nichelle, signs. You mentioned that your parents had to talk to you and sit you down to provide that reality check for you to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. Would you say that did either you or your parents saw signs early on? Or could it just have been that this person was very much a charmer out in public, and then a different person behind closed doors?
I don't think anyone around me saw the signs. I think actually one person, my line sister, when I was going through my divorce, she actually was extremely like close to me during that process. And she said that she did have a gut feeling. So kind of with your last question, how do you have that conversation with someone? You don't want this person to think you don't care for them, or you're hating on them, or, you know, you're not happy for them. So I think that was something she struggled with, and where I'm like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? But outside of that, no, I didn't see the signs. Of course, hindsight 2020, you know, I now know what the lies were that would have been, but the lies were so amazing. You know, it was not a lie when it was a lie. It only was a lie because I found out otherwise. Mm-hmm. So no, in my situation, I did it. And, you know, again, when I say educate yourself, there are certain doctors that talk about narcissism on, you know, YouTube, and that I've been given to by my therapist. And not all the time there are red flags. You know, depending on the type of person you are, your red flag may not be my red flag. A green flag may not be a green flag for you. So it really just kind of depends on what your experience has been. I was green to an abusive world, like green. I knew nothing of it. So I was the perfect candidate, right, you know, to try all these things with. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, marriage is hard in the beginning. And oh my God, when you have a children, people don't like all the things that people say. And you're like, okay. But again, like I said, I didn't, my family didn't. I think it's just when I started acting not myself, it was like, what is going on? I didn't even know I wasn't acting like not myself. So.
Well, that's really great. I want to point out you're having people close to you that you share what's going on in your life. Some people will say, oh, you keep your relationship issues to yourself. I think what we can all agree on is that that's to a certain point. I think that having a confidant and private conversations, kind of sharing what's happening in your relationships, whether it's a friendship or an intimate relationship with someone else that you trust, can be very helpful to also help kind of do that reality testing for you if you aren't able to do that for yourself. And so that is that support system that we're talking about. So support system doesn't have to be a group of 10 people. It can really be a handful. It could be 2 or 3 people that you are really close to, that know the most about you, and can know when you are not yourself in that moment and bring that to light. Thank you so much for sharing, Nichelle. Moving on to our next question in terms of based on your experience, Nichelle, this is for Nichelle, based on your experience, how has that changed your outlook on establishing new or future personal relationships with others?
It's a really good question. I think for a while, my relationships just kind of felt like this, not knowing if this relationship was real, if that relationship was real. Am I being too emotional? Am I not being too emotional? Am I overreacting? Am I just reverting back to the trauma? I think it just webbed and flowed for a really long time. And I think from a perspective of friendships and a perspective of dating, a perspective of my family relationships, I think they all look different. And one thing I pride myself in, prior to all of this and after, I have individual relationships with people. And so that's what's most important to me. Long as I have this one-on-one with people, that makes me feel good. And I think what opened my eyes a lot, that saying no new friends, for me, I had to get new friends that kind of was going through things that I had went through. And if I'm being transparent, my ex-husband, first wife, she reached out to me and I was like, this just seems really weird, but who better to know what have I experienced than his first wife? Mm-hmm. And so against people's judgment that was close to me, I decided to get to know this woman, and she helped me. My divorce lasted 2.5 years. Every single day, that woman called me, texted me, sent me an uplifting email. And when I tell you every single day, she did not miss a day. And that was a support that I needed, that I did not know that I needed. And that was a confirmation that I felt like didn't make me crazy. And it gave me the liberty and the freedom to open back up to other people into my life, because I had this person that I can release this to. So it allowed me to be in a better place with family, relationships, because I think sometimes my parents been together since they were 15, still married. It was frustrating talking to my parents because they've been in love for forever. They don't know what I'm going through. They can empathize with me, but they don't know what I'm going through. She understood. So I think that, and I think it's a work in progress. I still have healing, and I'm still working on some relationships that were troubling to me during that time. Is it worth savaging or is it not? Was that just a season or not? So I think it's just something that always is just like this when you experience that type of stuff, because you don't know.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Great. I think that your experience, being open and willing to share that, is very valuable to our audience. And I'm sure they're taking something away from it. And I hope at the very least, as Matt mentioned, talking about it at the very least. Are there any, this is to the both of you, are there any characteristics that a person should feel cautious about in relationships, whether it's friendships or significant others, that they should cause them to pause, cause them to think, that could be treading on gaslighting or the narcissism?
Matt?
Of course, if you're dealing with somebody who is very entitled, privileged, who shows no empathy, someone who is overly critical, a person that is very controlling. And then also I want to just make mention of this, that gaslighting it's not just gender specific. You also have, women who are narcissists as well. You have women who gaslight as well, but a lot of times it is just measured towards men, and so that's a misconception. That's a stereotype. So you have to be careful with your emotions and who you give your emotions to, because your emotions are very valuable, and who you connect to is something that you have to be very concerning. So there's a lot of red flags, especially when you said something, the person makes you feel like you're crazy and that you didn't say it, or they are countering. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. Countering is when someone questions a person's memory. Are you sure about that? you have a bad memory. Or withholding, when someone pretending that they do not understand the conversation or refusing to listen to make a person doubt themselves. Trivializing, a person belittles or disregards how someone else's feels. Denial involves a person refusing to take responsibility for their actions. Diverting, discussing, a person changes the focus of a discussion by questioning the other person's credibility. So these are some things, some red flags. Look at those things. If they got all of these things that they're doing to you, run.
Now, let me ask you a question. As you're sharing these particular characteristics, what pops in my head is how easily they can be overlooked based upon the profession of the person. So if we think about all of what you just shared can benefit a person who's an attorney, can benefit a person who is a surgeon, can benefit a person who is a CEO. And so for someone that may work in a particular profession where they are utilizing all of these particular traits to benefit them in the professional world, I can see how that could be overlooked, that they are the way they are, because they're the CEO or they're the VP. And they're used to talking to people that way, or they're used to engaging with others in that way, that helps them be successful. They run a multi-million-dollar company. So how do we, what can we tell ourselves when we are giving excuses for?
Well, I think, I just feel like that if you are a lawyer, you're a CEO, whatever, you still have to have some aspect of character, because relationships are very important when you're running businesses and you're networking with other people and other lawyers. If you have no credibility, you're not going to go very far, no matter where you are. So people look at, okay, you might be a bulldog in the courtroom, but you're a great person outside of the courtroom. That goes far. So I just think that when people make those excuses that this is my profession and so this is how I act, that's just an excuse for them to get away with abusing you. And so, but oftentimes we are attracted to power, and we're attracted to titles, and it's just, and people can use the power and their titles against you. And next thing you know, they have you in a situation where it's that if the person was working at McDonald's, you wouldn't let none of that go.
Right.
But just because they're a CEO, then you're letting it go because you're thinking with your gold digger mentality,
right,
rather than with the mentality that you need to have a beautiful, balanced, precious relationship that is something that you treasure, So I like to play dominoes. And so there's a saying that all money is not good money.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But put yourself in situations where, like, let's just say someone is married to a person in power. They don't work. They don't have anything, and everything is dependent upon that person, man, woman, whomever. And it's really hard to navigate through those situations, or even to convince yourself that you will be okay, because oftentimes for a period of time, you won't be okay. I mean, there was a period in time that no one knew, but because of my pride and I had to let everything go, I was on food stamps. And I know many people that be like, oh my God, no, I could never do that. You don't know what you never could do until you're faced with certain circumstances and, decisions that you have to make for survival, especially when there's other people involved. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I feel like that's a lot going on. There are so many people that are trapped in these relationships. Again, to his point, women, men, whomever is the powerhouse in the house, you're trapped because you don't know what else to do. This is your source of roof over your head,
right?
Your source of driving from point A to point B. They have all this power, you have nothing. So you're afraid to say X, Y, and Z, because if that person loses their job, then you guys absolutely have nothing. It's a really tough place mentally for people to be in, and even those around you, because running my mental health nonprofit, I have people that reach out to me all the time, and it breaks me down into tears because that's the fear. Like, I know this person is this, but how can I safely and effectively get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
You need money for an attorney. You need money to eat. You need money to put a roof over your head. You need money to escape. You need so many things. And it's just so sad to me.
Yes. And
I've been there.
And I would also incorporate in that parenting, right? Parenting, if we are, as parents, our position of financial power over our children, and we are making them, choose a route for education because we're paying for it, that is manipulation. Even if it's well-meaning, right? And so, that is definitely a great point. Thank you so much for providing that clarification. And it is, I want to say, for the parents out there, anyone that's interacting with kids, this idea of young people looking to, or I guess old people, everybody wanting to have someone take care of them. This idea that I'm going to find someone that's going to take care of me comes with consequences. It sounds, like a fantasy as it's described, but that comes with consequences, and that more than likely people that are controlling are attracted to that. And they want that power and they want that control. We do have a few more questions. In reference to Matt, you shared that they're smart, narcissistic individuals are very intelligent. So I don't want to portray that these are not highly intelligent people. They're very savvy, they're very charming. And you mentioned that they look for individuals which they can control. And a question came through with regards to, how do we not be those people? What can we do so that we don't give off or behave in a way where it seems that we are easily controlled? Is there anything that we can do?
Yeah, first of all, take your time getting into relationships. Learn the individual. It takes time to be a friend. Work on the friendship, the relationship. There's 3 reasons why people get divorced. The first reason why a person gets divorced is communication. Work on your communication. The second reason why people get divorced is because of finances. So if you can't talk, you're definitely not talking about finances. And the third reason why people get divorced is intimacy. And intimacy doesn't mean sex. It just means the person give you compliments. You can compliment each other. You can talk to each other. You can watch movies with each other. You're almost dealing with like your best friend. And that's the person that you want to deal with. Because when you're friends, that means I can talk to you about anything and everything. When we're friends, if I make an off comment remark to you, even though it's not my intention to do that, you can talk to me and you can tell me, hey, listen, I didn't like how you said that. Just like somebody said in the chat that they didn't like that I said gold digger. And I understand, and I didn't mean anything negative about it, but sometimes we're thinking about a person's title. We're thinking about how much money they got. We're thinking about those things. So I could have said that in a better way. So if I offended anybody, my bad, but that's not my intentions. It might impacted you in that way. So therefore I'm apologizing about how it impacted you, right? So it's just that healthy communication that will help you to understand, okay, this is the direction of the relationship, and then through time, if we take our time, then no one can keep that mask on, that persona on for a long period of time. Eventually, the narcissist is going to have to rear his ugly head or her ugly head at some point. So therefore, I just believe in taking your time, becoming friends, work on your communication, and then also adhere to red flags. Like I said before, if you see these red flags, run.
Yes, Nichelle.
I think that's easier said than done.
Which part? The running?
All of it.
Oh,
I just
okay.
think that it's easier said than done, because again, I have parents that got together immediately. They're still together 40 something years later. So I think if you are who you say you are, then you're going to be who you're going to be, and you're going to learn, grow, and love, because people are going to change. And I just had this conversation earlier with my sisters, because there is a family friend of ours that we've been friends with our whole entire life. And recent information turns out this person is not a healthy, good, safe person to be around. Not the person we grew up to know, not the person that's been extremely close to my family. But the red flags, the reality of what has taken place, you can't ignore it. And that's a 30 plus 40-year relationship that has to end, because it is unhealthy and you didn't see the signs. I think sometimes when life don't go as people plan, or a tragedy happened in someone's life, that person that was your best friend or that you did know or was this way, situations change people. And we don't always share what we're really going through in the inside. So it's really difficult, in my personal opinion, to see that. And I'm not just thinking of like a relationship, friendships. Sometimes people are weak-minded and they listen to outside sources, and those outside sources are breaking them away from you, which is a positive light, or whatever the case may be. So I just feel like it's so easy to say run, but these are people that have intertwined their worlds, and it's just hard. I'm just speaking from a different aspect. That's all. And I do agree with the ladies about the gold digging. Like, I think a lot of times people do say that, but certain people were a certain way before you met them, and now you're using certain things against them to gaslight them, or to belittle them, or to make them feel less than what they really are, because that's what's happening, unfortunately, in the dating world, in the marriage world, in the parenting world, in the work world. Like, you're just surrounded by it.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. We do have a question in reference to, we've talked about gaslighting and narcissism and manipulation in our personal lives, with whether it's parents or siblings or significant others. What happens, or what would you suggest if a teacher is manipulating your child at school, is gaslighting your child at school? Any thoughts or ideas or suggestions of what a parent can do?
I was gonna let you go on the show with that one.
Okay.
And I'll chime in afterwards.
Okay. So I think for me, again, I'm not the expert, so I don't know like the right way, probably. The parent in me at the beginning of every school year. And again, I'm not sure if you have more children than your 3-year-old daughter, but I have a 7-year-old. So my knowledge goes to 7 years of age. And that's it right now. But at the beginning of every year, I make sure that I have a meeting with her teachers, who the teachers are going to be, and share, the highs and the lows and the important things that they need to know about my child, and certain things to watch out for, whatever the case may be. And then making sure that I establish that open communication, and just monitor that throughout. Fortunately for me, I haven't had that experience at my daughter's school, but I think when my daughter was younger, and actually, I guess I am happy to say this, because it does happen when they're really, really young too. My daughter was an early talker, but for whatever reason, she didn't feel comfortable talking at school. So things would happen at school, and she would come home and tell me, and then I would call the school and I say, hey, X, Y, and Z happened. They thought that I was interrogating my child. I'm like, what? Now you're coming from a parenting. Absolutely, am I not interrogating my child? We just have a really good open communication, and she feels comfortable talking to me. Because it was early on, what I did pull my child out of that school and put her into a school where she is flourishing, that fits her. And again, I think you have to pay attention to your children, and that determines where your child will go. My therapist that I was seeing every week for years here, she helped me identify what would be the best school based on my child and how she was performing and the things that she was into. And I'm forever grateful for that. because it takes a village. But definitely if there's ever any issues, address it head on, because you are your child's advocate. You are that child's voice. And again, you know your child also. So I know my child. I'll just say that.
I like the last point that Michelle stated. Knowing your child is important, because oftentimes children can manipulate, and I'm speaking from personal experience. You know, I might not want to go to school that day, or I might say something bad about the teacher or something of that nature. And it was, it's just a child just, not wanting to cooperate. But how do you know? You have to go to these parent-teacher conferences. You're gonna have to be visible. You need to be involved. And so just from that standpoint, when you get to know the teacher, when you get to know the staff, you get to know the administration at a particular school, then you know whether to pull your child or not. Because sometimes there might be a personality conflict between your child and the teacher, and you might have to help your child work through that, because you know what? They're gonna have to work through other personality conflicts in life.
Yes.
And so so I'm not gonna be able to change schools because of economics or I'm gonna have to work. We're gonna have to work through this. And if I can't work through it, then at that point in time, let's change schools. So I agree everything what Michelle is saying, that if it's toxic and your child is not flourishing, pull your child. But also on the flip side, it could be something that you can really invest, teaching your child how to get through some issues. And this can be a learning situation for your child to push through those particular issues. And then they get gratification at the end. So, you have to look at it from all facets. It's no right or wrong answer, but long as you have your child's best interest in mind, that's the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. We have 3 more questions here. In reference to yourself, and in healing from any past experiences and dealing with people that manipulated you, I know, Nichelle, you spoke on how your experience, but would therapy be the first place to start? You mentioned that you got into therapy, Nichelle. Would that be the first place to start in the healing process?
I would say yes. I have a huge admiration for therapists. They did all that schooling and took all those hard tests for a reason. And I thoroughly appreciate them. And I just think that therapist is your voice. That therapist is, and I will say this, having the right therapist. Not every therapist is for you.
Yes.
Not every, and that's okay. So I think switching therapists or whatever the case may be, finding that right therapist is what's key. And then it's smooth sailing in the stand, because that's that person that's going to have your back and be an advocate for you. And I think that's really important.
For the healing process.
For the healing process, before the healing process, during the healing process, all of it. Like, I am a huge advocate of having a really good therapist that you feel understands you and that you can be vulnerable with, you know, and honest. Because sometimes people have therapists. I went to premarital counseling and marital counseling, and my ex-husband lied in all the sessions. So sometimes, you want to be somewhere where someone's going to hold you accountable and where you can be open and be honest and not be ashamed or afraid to share anything, because that's the only way you're going to really get help. And it's not free. So
right. We want to invest in yourself and invest in your own healing. Will definitely take some sacrifice for yourself, right? Thank you so much for that. We do have a question. This is for Matt. So I'm going to read the question as is. These days, toxic masculinity seems to be equally confronted by toxic femininity under disguises of being a strong, independent sister, strong Black woman. What can we do as Black men to change the narrative? Now, I'm not sure if changing the narrative is in reference to the toxic masculinity, changing the narrative as it relates to interpreting an independent, strong Black woman as toxic, or if toxic femininity is another term that needs to be
Coin.
Yeah.
You know, let's go back to the history.
Okay. Yes.
And I think just going back to where gaslighting started. Okay. And it comes from the title of a play, 1938, and a film, Gaslight. It was a story where a husband conceals his search for his wife's aunt missing jewels by making his wife doubt herself. It tells her that the sounds in the attic she hears and the dimming gas lights around the home are imaginary, right? So this was in 1938 and also 1944. So think about the times of the dynamics in the household. 9 times out of 10, the man worked, and the woman took care of the kids and took care of the house. All right. So, of course, there was a lot of toxic masculinity during that time period. And think about it so far as how your grandparents, if you go to your grandparents, and some of you guys, I'm old, so some of you guys, great grandparents, and how your great grandmother, or your grandmother treated, your grandfather, and by being subservient, right? So let's race down to right now, whereas that American society, both parties in the household have to work.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care if they got a doctor. I don't care if you're a neurosurgeon. I don't care. You're gonna have to work. Okay. So therefore, that takes away a lot of the subservient type of mentalities when it comes to the dynamics in relationships. So I think that once those dynamics change, there is toxic femininity, because now, if I'm making more than you, and I got more degrees than you and things of that nature, then now I can be emasculating, right? And the relationship is not nurturing. Now the relationship is competitive. And then now you guys heard, I don't need a man. I can do this all by myself. That is a term that is stated, but you don't know how hurtful that is, because now for men, that puts us in a place of disempowerment. But now you have to think about, okay, now why are you saying this? Maybe because you have felt disempowered, or maybe you have seen your parents in a household and you've seen your father be so overwhelming or over masculine towards your mother, and you say, no, not me. I'm going to be the one that's going to be in charge in my relationship. So now you get into a relationship where it's that you're dealing with someone that is disempowered, or you enjoy disempowering this person because it does. So that's where the toxic femininity comes from. And the toxic masculinity comes from the opposite. So we're just getting into these dynamics and everything that comes from our history, and gets to a point where it's that we have to get back to the foundation of, being able to communicate effectively, being able to not your title or your status dictate your character, being able to treat people like you want to be treated. And the relationship shouldn't be competitive. The relationship should be nurturing. The relationship should be supportive. But oftentimes we talk about power relationships, right? So now you're thinking that the relationship, we are a power couple. That's the new term. And a power couple is competitive. The power couple, what you doing? Huh? What you doing?
Yes.
Well, I just got my 5th degree. What you doing? You ain't doing nothing. Me and the girls going to the DI. All I'm saying is that when you when you're in this competitive relationship and you're not nurturing each other, you're not supporting each other and things of that nature, then you creating a dynamic of, there's this movie out called oh my God, it's Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone. And they used to, first the relationship started off and they were really in love, and then they just start
War of the Roses.
Wars of the Roses.
War of the Roses. That's a great example.
That, I think that is probably what my great friend Leslie Thompson, BQ 87 Beta 8 is talking about. Mm-hmm. And I know that's his question because I saw it in the comments. Great question. Great question, Leslie Thompson. Great question. Very cerebral. You had me thinking. I almost went back into the DSM for that one. But I appreciate you pushing us and everything, sir, with that great question.
Yes, thank you so much. And, I think you make a good point that, and we may not have experience seeing relationships be nurtured by both people. And so now that should be more of an emphasis through communication, through intimacy, and through just being vulnerable with each other. How do we nurture each other so that we both can be successful in our professional lives and also be successful in the relationship? Yeah. Two more questions. I know we are down to our last 11 minutes. In reference to therapists, what do you suggest for someone who has dealt with a narcissistic or gaslighting therapist who may have made you feel that your problems aren't a big deal, or that you're overthinking them, even if it turns out you're not? Very interesting question. Thank you so much for our anonymous attendee for putting that in our Q&A.
I think Michelle, she answered that question earlier.
That happened to me twice.
Emphasize. Thank you.
Two different ways. Like the premarital counselor that we had, it was faith-based because, again, my ex-husband knew that Christianity was very important to me. And the marriage counselor that we had, no offense, Matt, but he was a man, and I felt like he just was all about the man. I was like, oh my God. So I really shut down, and it was not great. I did feel comfortable enough when everything had transpired to make an appointment, pay $250 to see that lady that signed off on us getting married. I'm like, woman, you're supposed to be able to help me. And she's like, I can only go by what's being presented in my office. She was absolutely right. But it was that important to me because, again, I respect therapists. I'm like, tell me what I didn't see. Like, what is it? Can we go through this together? Because I was very careful, and she helped me. And I was like, you know what? She was the best person that I could have gone to at that particular time for that. The man that I was seeing while I was married was not, but it did not deter me from being open to seeing another therapist. I think if you are dealing with a therapist that, again, like you said, I did touch on it. Now that's where you should run, because that's your money. They do not deserve your money if they're gaslighting you or being narcissistic. Leave them, because at the end of the day, we're all human. Matt is a dad and a husband, I'm assuming, at the end of the day. So
I'm not a husband.
He still has his stuff, huh?
I'm not a husband.
Okay, well, he's a father at the end of the day, and he still has his stuff. We're all human, and I think that just kind of goes into how we sometimes put pastors on the scale of being God. Like, at the end of the day, we all bleed the same way. So it's okay if you're not connecting with a therapist. Do not waste your money, because it is not cheap to see someone that you're not connecting with and you feel less than what you went in there for.
Well, let me tell you, what I usually tell people is like, find a good therapist is like find a good church, right? So when you go to a church and if the pastor is not, I prefer a teaching pastor. Some people prefer a different type of pastor. They might want the pastor to holler and saying and dance. And some people like a good singing pastor. Whatever you like. make sure that you go from a therapist to another therapist to another till you find a person that you like you find a good, because at the end of the day, this is your soul. At the end of the day, this is your life. At the end of the day, you're going to the gates of heaven all by yourself, right? Yep. And so you got to go through life, guess what? In your own skin. Yep. And you got to deal with those issues, right? So I would think that you find a person that's gonna fit you like a well-tailored outfit. Like it only suits you. This person gets you. You can feel transparent. I don't want a therapist that I gotta lie to because I'm thinking like the therapist might be looking at me, side-eyeing me and things. And I want a therapist that's been through some stuff. So they can identify with me. They can empathize with me. I don't want the choir boy therapist or the choir girl therapist. No. Give me that person that's been through some things that when I hit them with it, they didn't even flinch. I'm like, oh, I didn't hit you with that. You didn't even flinch. Okay, well, let me hit you with this one. Oh,
and do your research. Yeah, you know, Psychology Today, if you go on that, you see the therapist, you read the reviews, you can see what people love or dislike about them. Like, you have to do your research. At the end of the day, a therapist is, to me, more important than the job that you have every day. And you do your research before you go on these interviews.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Thank
so
you.
I agree totally.
Thank you. And I want to also make it universal. Whether you're seeing a doctor that you feel uncomfortable with and can't be transparent and honest, get a new doctor. Whoever that is helping take care of your mental health and your physical health, you need to feel able to be vulnerable, to be honest and upfront with. And so find that person for yourself. We have one last question in the Q&A in reference to books. Are there any books that you would recommend to help a person learn more? So we have the internet, you can Google, but learn more about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. Dr. Matt, you mentioned the DSM. Should people run out and get the DSM, or are there other books that that people can get on Amazon to help educate themselves? Nichelle, you mentioned to educate and do your research. Were there any books that you used as well?
The books that I use, they weren't specifically about narcissism and gaslighting. It was more of like going through a divorce type of situation and what that looks like. So no, I think it's 2023. I joined all the Instagram hashtags of narcissism and gaslighting support groups that I could find, and it helped me. And it still does, because again, this is a process, you know, healing or dealing with that. It's never ending, you know, it's never ending. So just like self-care, you have to, you know what you need to keep going. And you know what works best for you. For me, it was Instagram. And again, some of the YouTube messages from some therapists. But I kind of, you know, the books were for me was for divorce. It wasn't, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
I like articles, sometimes just keeping things short and sweet. Forbes has a great article about gaslighting. And then, of course, after each article, there are, you know, references and resources and things of that nature, books that people can read about specific topics and subjects. I haven't read any particular books about narcissism per se, other than textbooks, and I don't go out and buy these textbooks and things
right,
things of that nature. But I understand what you're saying, things that might help you to kind of get through it. And so I would just say, like Nichelle stated, do your research, because everything that I might like to read, you might not enjoy reading. Depends on the author and how the author is portraying things. So do your research, and there's plenty of stuff out there that you can Google and just do your research, and a lot of bestsellers out there and things of that nature. But no, I haven't any book titles at this particular time.
Okay. we have a suggestion in our chat box of a book for those that are interested. A participant added Power, Surviving and Thriving After Narcissistic Abuse, a collection of essays and Malignant Narcissism and Recovery from Emotional Abuse, for those that may want to check it out. Additionally, I do want to, one of our participants provided a comment that I do want to share as a cautionary measure. We are talking about these terms, narcissism and narcissistic personality disorders. Please do not go out and call everybody a narcissistic personality disorder person or a narcissist, right? One of the things that Matt clarified in the beginning, which it was purposeful, was that according to being able to diagnose requires certain criteria, and that we can experience or have these symptoms here and there. So I want to caution everyone with using these terms frivolously, and understanding that to be diagnosed by a mental health professional is very challenging, because we as professionals would need to see the person several times over a period of time in order to come to the conclusion, right? And just as we talked about, these are individuals who are very savvy, they're charming, they're very intelligent, all of these things that can mask the true person. It takes time to get to know them. And so just understand that a trained mental health professional is the only one who's going to be able to diagnose, and that, you know, if you're having issues in a relationship, you want to get help for yourself and analyze yourself and how you are reacting, because we can only control what we do. We cannot control what other people do, how they are going to react to us. That's out of our control, and we're going to have to let that go. But we want to make sure that we stay healthy and we are as mentally strong as we can be to handle whatever it is that we are up against in our lives. And so our panelists also suggest that walking away may be an answer for you if you're able to, but as Michelle said, sometimes that may not be easy to do. So give yourself grace. At the end of the day, give yourself grace as you are navigating this journey called life. We do have a post. I'm glad you put that in there. Therapy for Black Girls is a podcast, and also there's a website, and there's also Therapy for Black Men, I believe that it's called, that I will go ahead and add that in as well. Any final remarks from Matt and Michelle based on this conversation? And I do apologize. We are right at 8 o'clock, but I do want to get your final remarks before we close it out.
No, I'm going to be real short. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, for those who need help or assistance, please reach out to them. Self-care is very important. Write down some things that you need to do to take care of yourself, and that's paramount. The self-care is paramount. So make sure that you do some things for yourself and take a step back, connect back to who you are, and love on you. And that's all I have for you guys.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure to be on this panel with you and my lovely sorors. I appreciate you guys thinking so much about mental health, because as I mentioned earlier, this is truly important. I think for me, I would like to share with everyone, you may or may not know. So do your research, ask the questions, find out if this is indeed something you're experiencing, or if this is something someone close to you are, experiencing, and find out how to deal with it. And to your point of running away, don't just run away. That's how people lose their life. There's action plans that can be put in place that will save your life, as it did for my daughter and I. So as we're navigating these relationships, just, stay positive and love on yourself as much as possible.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Burse. Dr. Burse, who is our co-chair for our Physical Mental Health Committee as well. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Nadia. My gosh, this was phenomenal. And I know I may say that with everyone, and this was definitely no exception. It was definitely truly phenomenal, so informative. And this is the Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, our Mental Health Monday webinar series. Tonight was Narcissism and Gaslighting in Relationships. Thank yous go out to Dr. Matt Smith and for imparting your expertise to us today, and Michelle Wilson for being so open with us. We definitely appreciate that. Thank you, Sora Nadia Barnett, our Mental Health Monday Subcommittee Chair, and Rashad Mitchell Jefferson, our Physical and Mental Health Committee Chair, for moderating for us tonight. Also to my fellow co-chair, Dr. Cherie Hill, and Madam President Sabrina Clark. And most of all to you, the audience, for joining us tonight. Even if you've never been on the receiving end, we all know someone who is or has been. So hopefully we will have some be empowered to try to help them and listen. Please follow us on social media for upcoming events, and particularly the exciting details on our in-person mental health event in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. There will be breakout sessions touching on various aspects of mental health and screenings. You do not want to miss it, and we are looking forward to everyone joining and bringing somebody. So please have a good night and be safe. Panelists, please remain on here with us.
I want to thank everybody for the invite. I had a great time, so thank you guys for ingratiating yourselves to me, and I really, really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you once again.
Thank you.